The first time I coughed up blood, I was jerking off. Yeah, there's a reason I'm last. I'm not a religious person, but it did cross my mind that I might have been being smote by the Lord. You know? I hadn't thought about what it looked like, but coughing up blood while jerking off, that's a good bet, you know? And so that was June 2017. When I was like 13 and I was like just starting to masturbate, I wore a Star of David necklace that I would take off and put on my dresser. That was like how religious I was. Yeah, it's cute. It's cute. But by 2017, I had lost that necklace along with my belief in God. But I did think, hey, if ever there was a sign to stop masturbating, this is probably it. So I called 911 and they sent an ambulance. And when I got in, I heard the EMTs say something about, I live in Flatbush. And so I heard them say something about taking me to Kings County Hospital. Yeah, there's some doctors in the room who just laughed at that. That's important information if you're not. Because 2 weeks before that, this is 100% true, I had run into a friend on the bus, and he was an emergency medicine resident at Kings County. And I was like, hey, man, this is a friend from college. I was like, hey, man, how's it going? How's work? And he was like, it's great. It's really interesting. But, boy, let me tell you, you do not want to wind up in the emergency room at Kings County Hospital in Flatbush. 2 weeks later, I found myself as a patient in the emergency room at Kings County. I went in and I said to the doctor, I was like, hey, I just coughed up blood. And he was like, how much? And I was like, any. Why? Like, he didn't even look up from his chart, He was like, well, I had never been to a hospital in New York, so I didn't figure that, like, oh, yeah, they would just be sort of like dicks about it, He was rude. I was like, hey, I just coughed up blood. He was like, oh, yeah, I got a guy back there just coughed up a foot. Men's size 9, got a puka shell anklet on it. You coughing up vacation feet? No, back of the line. I got an old lady back there, multiple stab wounds. Yeah, she got robbed by a rat. Okay, you getting mugged by vermin, kid? No, get out of here, I got a little boy back there, lost his entire physical being. He's just a human essence floating. Has your spirit escaped your corporeal form? No? Fucking get out of here. All of that happened. He told me that if I coughed up a cup of blood, that would constitute an emergency and that I should come back. Which is weird to me, because I don't know if y'all have ever seen, like, a movie where a character coughs up blood. Yeah, it doesn't end well. It's the universal dramatic sign for this motherfucker's about to die. From ancient Greece until today. You never see an HBO miniseries where in episode 1, some poor bastard coughs up blood and then just carries on building a sailboat or whatever. So they sent me home. Second time I coughed up blood, I was on my way to an open mic. And boy, if there's ever been a sign from God to quit comedy, I feel like that's a good one. But it still wasn't a cup. It was like a smattering of blood, a Jackson Pollock of blood upon the sidewalk of 14th Street and Avenue A. But it's still, that was a Thursday, and I had scheduled an appointment with a pulmonologist on Friday. So I went home very afraid. And I made it to the doctor's appointment on Friday, and they did some blood work and took some x-rays. And the doctor came back, and he was like, well, you're very sick. Yeah. I feel like that's obvious. I'm at the coughing up blood doctor. It's like going to the bank to take out like a third mortgage on your house, and the teller comes back with some files, and they're like, well, you're not doing great financially. I know. That is why I am here. And so this was a Friday. He's like, you're not doing great. I'm like, uh-huh. Where'd you go to school? And he was like, well, we've scheduled a procedure called a bronchoscopy to figure out what's going on. I was like, cool, let's do it. Like, I started undressing. I was like, where do we do it here? Is there a secondary location? And he was like, oh, no, we're going to do that Monday morning. Why is medicine a 9 to 5? Coughing up blood, as it turns out, is sort of a 24/7 thing, just in all hours. It's just not really, keep time. It's not a 9 to 5. Anyway, so that night I went and I stayed with my parents in the city, and at like 2 in the morning I started coughing up like a lot of blood, quite a bit, more than before. And I was remembering what that doctor at Kings County had said. It was like, if you cough up a cup of blood, that's, bad sign. And so, and my mom was there with me. She was, rubbing my back, which that's not. Doesn't do much of anything. Did you say stop? Yeah, that's what I said to my lungs. Stop, She was like, it's gonna be okay. It's like, how do you know? I'd like to measure how much blood I've coughed up, mother. Into her bowls. I was coughing into bowls, and I was like, I want to see like how much blood I'm coughing up here, and she said no. And I was 26 at the time, and I was in a very odd position of, but I felt like a little kid. I was like, well, I want to measure my blood, Mom. It's my blood, and I'll measure it if I want to. She was like, not in this household, we're Jews. It's not a Jew thing, in case you're wondering. But the next morning, I had a very high fever, and we went to a different hospital. I saw my friend, by the way, at Kings County when they were like looking at me. He was like, hey, man, I told you not to come here. I was like, yeah, I know. Sort of freaked out. Nice guy, Ned. So anyway, I went to a different hospital, and they did some more tests, and they were like, hey, man, you got tuberculosis. Yeah. Anyone else in here ever have that? No? There are no old-timey prospectors in here? No 19th century French sex workers at Caveat? It's not very common. So I just kept on coughing up that sweet, sweet blood, and but I was in the hospital now, so I was relieved because they were like taking me seriously. They had admitted me to the pulmonary ICU. That's for the non-doctors in the room. That's the your lungs are fucked wing of the hospital. And eventually they put me into a coma for about 4 days, and they could not stop the bleeding, so they just removed the part of my lung that had the tuberculosis. Sure. Yeah, it was pretty wild. And I gotta say, if you have a loved one or a friend who's in a medically induced coma and they're like planning to bring them out of it, so that they're about to wake up, have some fun. Have some fun with that. You can tell them anything. They're gonna be very disoriented. You can just be like, hey, so you're not sick anymore, but you are RoboCop. I know you weren't a police officer before, but you gotta get to Detroit, stat. Whatever. My sister just asked me if I knew where my phone charger was. She was like, my phone's dead. I was like, I've been dead. What? What are you talking about? So I was quarantined in the hospital there, and when they sent me home, when you have a highly contagious airborne illness like tuberculosis, the Department of Health will declare you legally gross. It's an official. The doctors are nodding as I was legally gross. And they don't want you to go nowhere. They want you to pretty much just stay home. And it's so dangerous that they had a little Asian lady come over to watch me take pills. I don't have a joke for that. That's just a thing that happened. That was part of our summer. Me and that lady, she would just watch me take pills. And they would call to make sure that I wasn't going nowhere, you know? But I was bored, so they would call and they'd be like, hey, you know, how you doing? And I'd be like, oh, good, I'm just down at my nephew's summer camp teaching the kiddos to swim. You know? You know. I'm just at the old folks' home cooling down their soup. Whatever. Just to have some fun with the federal government, you know. But they didn't. It took them a little while to send me home because the Department of Health had to like clear me to go home, and the doctor said that I was ready to go home on a Saturday. And you know, it turns out Department of Health also sort of a weekday sort of thing. So I was alone. I was quarantined in my own room, my own hospital room, and but I was like feeling okay. I had been recovering from surgery for a little while. And I was like happy to be alive. I had my phone with me, and I had the hospital's Wi-Fi password, and I had my own bathroom. And what I also had but forgot about was a wireless heart monitor strapped to my chest. And boy, did those nurses think that I was going into cardiac arrest. They swooped into the room. I was like, I'm having a bowel movement, which you never say when you're having a bowel movement. You only say that when you're jerking off in a hospital bathroom after surviving tuberculosis. And, that's a fun story to tell. Starts with me jerking off, ends with me jerking off. You could say it's a perfect circle jerk. Hey, that's it for me. Thank you so much. My name's Sherm Jacobs.